Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Focused Ultrasound GBM Workshop, and we are in the Histotripsy session. My name is Zhen and from University of Michigan, and we have three panelists here. Vlaisavljevich from Virginia Tech University, and he has been working on histotripsy for over a decade. Came initially from actually the Michigan group, from our group, and now have his individual lab working on both ablation for a wide range of applications, immune response induced by histotripsy, and other things. Dr. Joan Vidal-Jové, he is the PI of the first histotripsy tumor treatment, which is for actually patients with liver cancer in Spain. So he has a lot of experience with the clinical side of the histotripsy treatment. Then we also have Tatiana Khokhlova from University of Washington, and she is one of the leading figure in boiling histotripsy. So it really is a great pleasure and honor to have this fantastic panel of leaders in the field to discuss a few burning questions, especially related to GBM. So I'm going to start with some of the questions we already prepared, and I welcome all the audience to type your questions into the chat, and we will discuss as we go. All right, let's start. So first, to start with, we have her histotripsy, but then within histotripsy, there's also histotripsy versus boiling histotripsy. So I want to start with, kind of also as opening and introduction to ask panelists to, give us an introduction of what you view as a difference between histotripsy versus boiling histotripsy. Eli, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah, I can start. I think, there's really, even within cavitational histotripsy, there's a couple buckets. So we tend to think about intrinsic threshold histotripsy using very short, high pressure, so single cycle pulses, typically that have to rise over the intrinsic threshold of basically nucleating cavitation bubbles in water. So that's approximately 25 to 30 megapascals for almost all soft tissues that are water-based, the exception being tissues like fat or other fatty tissues we've seen. Then there's shock scattering histotripsy, which uses typically between 5 and 20 cycle pulses. This is a little bit lower pressure threshold, ranges based on tissue stiffness from about 10 to 28 megapascal, and really generates initial bubbles and then grows these large bubble clouds. And for all histotripsy, it's really essential that we get this dense focal bubble clouds so that we can have a larger region that's treated. And we've seen recently that the efficiency of ablation really is tied to the properties of the bubbles within the cloud. And then finally, boiling uses a little bit lower pressures, much longer pulses, so millisecond length pulses, to rapidly boil the tissue up to 100 degrees. And you typically get a little bit of different bubble dynamics. It's thermally induced cavitation, but the bioeffects remain very similar, even on the immune side as well, I believe, from the data I've seen, that it's more of a mechanical end effect because the heating is so rapid. So still distinct from thermal ablation. I'll kind of hand it over there.
Tanya, as a boiling histotripsy expert, do you have anything to add or would like to add anything here?
Sure, yeah. I agree with Eli that the bioeffect, which is really the liquefaction of tissue down to subcellular level, is very similar in all histotripsies across the board. More of the question is, how do we get there? How do we get that bubble activity that produces this effect? And the main question is, what is required of the transducer in order to achieve this effect and of the pulsing regimen? So, for instance, for the microtripsy or the very, very short pulses, which I believe has been used in your studies, Jen, with through this called ablation, that requires helmet-like, very focused transducers, whereas and lower frequency too. Whereas for boiling histotripsy, the transducer has to be less focused. It has to be less of a focusing angle, and therefore it can be made a bit more miniature and requiring a smaller acoustic window. So I guess the main difference between the different techniques is really boils down to what is the target at hand, and which way is it easier to get to the target and initiate the bubble activity that you want.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so since it's a GBM workshop, we're really most audience are really interested in the brain treatment here. And with a brain treatment, and we're talking about for using focused ultrasound, so we're talking about transcranial. So using actually a device outside the skull and focus to the brain. And the histotripsy has been used and showing, at least in the preclinical study in our lab, particularly we are showing now we can use a transducer outside the skull and focus into the skull to produce this tissue mechanical liquefaction effects you have seen, like we have seen in other organs. But however, for the brain, though, there is a particular concern in terms of the hemorrhage and swelling effects associated with the histotripsy. So I want to get people's experience, each of your experience, and also your thoughts around that, because for the brain treatment, that's a kind of big safety question. So Joan, you have a lot of clinical experience, right? And I know that even though you haven't really I don't know if you have treated the brain, but certainly some highly vascular organs that you have used for histotripsy. What's your comments in terms of the hemorrhage and the inflammation associated with histotripsy treatment? Any thoughts and comments?
Well, we had several blood ablation volumes obtained in the liver, which are organs that are very vascularized and also with ducts and different type of vascularization, and we haven't seen at all any bleeding. And there's a characteristic that the small vessels, from the order of millimeters, can be ablated, but the rest of the vessels are preserved. And we have wonderful images of contrast-enhanced ultrasound that show that we have the sphere of the ablation completed, and in the middle you see a patent vessel, a hepatic vein that goes through the ablation obtained, and it's preserved. It's preserved and it's patent, so it's not clotted inside. So this is something that's very characteristic and very different from the thermal ablation that I used to do. And on the other side, we've seen patients that we had effects of the ablation outside the targeted lesion. For instance, in other lesions, and we see like a rim around of like peripheral vessels that go there, and it's like those things stopped the growth of these other lesions. So it's like there's cells that go there and stop. There's a rim around all these lesions that get stopped there. So so my conclusion on that is that the swelling is not obtained, so you don't have like edema, you don't have all these, and everything happens inside the ablation volume. And there is where you have the mixture of antigens, lymphocytes and cells that can then start an immune effect.
Great. Well, we will talk about immune effects in a second. But you were saying that REM is more like inflammation. REM is a correct understanding? It sounds very interesting. Yeah.
Well, this is not inflammation. I think that this is cells going there, and because we did a small study with asking for some interleukin-6 and PCRs, and it was a small study on those patients, and we didn't see all these markers of inflammation going up. So if you do a surgery, if you do, an incision there, if you use a scalpel, you see those values going up, and you don't see those values going up with the histotripsy.
That's great. Yeah, I think the tissue selective effect you mentioned were the intact larger normal vessels remain there when the surrounding tissue are completely destroyed by histotripsy. We have seen a similar thing, which I agree that is one of the major reasons we haven't really seen much of hemorrhage even in the treatment in the brain. So Eli and Tanya, I know you guys have similar experience, I believe. Do you have any comments? And I think Joan said, really the clinical experience is really interesting. I know you guys also look at the physics side and so on. Any comments here regarding the hemorrhage and swelling induced by histotripsy?
So with the hemorrhage and swelling, and I think it may, I guess we're learning a lot from Juan because it was really the first clinical trial of histotripsy. And I think it has a lot to do, may have to do with the size of ablation relative to the size of the organism. So we have been doing mechanical ablation of tumors in the rat kidney, for instance. It's also a highly perfused organ, and there absolutely is swelling and some hemorrhage originally. It does resolve, but it is there. And however, the size of the ablation relative to the size of the kidney was substantial, let's say half of the rat's kidney. Whereas if the area of ablation is smaller relative to the organ size or vessel size, but potentially plays a role too, then it wouldn't be an issue like one is a legit.
Eli, do you have anything?
Yeah, I can kind of add on that. We've done a lot of treatments in different tumor types and different animal models. And I think we've seen, we mentioned the tissue selectivity aspects of histotripsy, which obviously is a major role on preserving major blood vessels and preventing extensive bleeding. But I also think we always see localized hemorrhage from, disrupting small blood vessels. And that's really interestingly always appears to be confined to the lesion itself. And I know you've seen that in the brain cases at the University of Michigan, all of in your different animal models as well, that it's not systemic bleeding outside of the volume. I think the last comment is very interesting as far as, potential animal models and the size of the ablations. One thing we've seen is we have seen swelling typically in cases when we're doing subcutaneous tumors. I think part of it is the size, and this is in mice, the size, as was mentioned, but also the structure of the surrounding tissue that's remaining. So for instance, I would expect to see this more on superficial tumors. The kidney is an interesting case. If you don't have a lot of tissue remaining outside, there's not much structure as that initial hemorrhage within the lesion, which appears to clot fairly rapidly locally inside the volume. And more recently, we've treated some very large tumors in dogs with soft tissue sarcomas, and we have seen some swelling in those cases where we're treating 3-4 centimeter volumes within these tumors. So, and it's not a large amount of swelling, but it seems to occur very quickly during the treatment and then stabilize. I think it's an open question when it comes to glioblastoma or brain tumors in general. There's been some work that's been done in vivo already, I think in the small animal models, Jen, with your group. We're looking at doing an initial safety study in a dog patients with spontaneous tumors in partnership with the Michigan group through an open window. And I hope that gives us some of these initial safety and efficacy data in a spontaneous tumor model that'll hopefully fill this translation gap that's closer to humans. And this is within the structure of a veterinary clinical trial. So I think we do need to look at each tumor specifically. And I think that comment about the size of the ablation is going to be really important, both with regards to swelling and some of the initial response, as well as how does that affect the immune response and some of the longer-term questions, and whether we should do for really large tumors treatments all at once or kind of repeated treatments. So to me, these are open questions that we still have to answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. Those are all great comments. In our study, in the normal pig brain, the hemorrhage is always within the treatment zone in the brain. In the mouse glioma model, we saw similar thing as Tanya saw. Like if the treatment zone is really, really big, where we're trying to treat almost half of the brain, then you do start seeing swelling. But if it's a smaller zone, then it's well confined within the treatment region. So I think there's a really interesting question on immune response that everybody has been talking about throughout this whole workshop. I want to get all of your input because I think you all have experience on this. And the brain is a different organ, but I know you have also experience in different organs too. Can you talk to based on your experience in terms of the immune response side? Joan, do you want to start with the clinical data? Yeah.
We had, I just want to add one thing that what we said before. I don't have just 1 minute. We had the opportunity to treat pancreas peak and to do an ablation there. And we had the same response in terms of having the swelling and the hemorrhage, but inside, everything confined inside the ablation volume. And it was the same. So answering now what you just asked me, we had the opportunity to obtain an immunological effect in non-treated lesions outside the ones that we treat in the liver in 2 patients. That was 25% of the patients treated, and we saw. I mean, it was 2 different patients. One was an hepatocellular carcinoma treatment, and the other one was liver metastasis. And those 2 patients, we saw after the treatment decrease on the tumor markers, alpha fetoprotein in one case, and CEA in the other case, and the response on the non-treated lesions was in one case, in the case of the hepatocellular carcinoma, was an stabilizing of all the rest of the lesions, so that the ablated lesion decreased and was resolved, and the other lesions were stopped, so they did not grow, and that response lasted, I would say, a few weeks, between 6 and 8 weeks. And in the case of the liver metastases, the other lesions shrunk, and there's a decrease on most of the lesions, and that response lasted between 8 and 12 weeks. So it was a longer response. And the difference between these 2 cases, and what I can say that it's different with other cases, is that the margin of the lesion, the margin of normal organ tissue that we obtained was bigger in those cases. So we did an ablation of a small lesion and then a huge margin. So the mixture there of tumor antigens and tissue normal proteins that ablated probably could make a difference there.
Thank you, Joan. Yes, unfortunately, we actually don't have much time now. So we're wrapping up here. And I just want to add that, we have done some immune study in the mouse brain tumor model, and we have seen the immune response in the brain as well, due to the tumor antigen release and the other, immunological cell deaths and so on. So thank you, everyone, for a great panel discussion here. And audience, if you have questions, please contact the panelists for future discussions. Thank you.